So just want to let everyone know, I'm actually going to be giving two short presentations tonight because in our first traffic calming meeting, y'all pointed out that McFerrin was planned for a bikeway at some point and that we were being repaved in the near future. So we haven't lumped those together because traffic calming and bikeways tend to need different procedures and levels of public engagement to proceed. So we're treating them as two separate projects, but it's very possible that they'll be installed around the same time, or at the very least, they'll coordinate very closely. So first on the agenda is kind of our second traffic calming meeting. And then immediately after that, I'll give a really brief sort of introduction to the bikeway project and what you can expect going forward, because this will not be the only opportunity that we're talking to you all about it. Just a brief introduction. My name is David Greaves. I am an engineer who works with NDOT on a lot of different traffic calming projects around the city. And I'm joined by my colleague Hannah as well. She'll be on as with me, and yeah. Okay, so I know that a lot of you were at meeting one, but some of you were not. So we're going to quickly cover some of the kind of higher level program information, and that starts with what is traffic calming. So the Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program, that's NSTC, is one that focuses on residential streets. We favor physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. Basically what that means is we don't choose one block at a time, and we're really shooting for speed reduction as an outcome of these projects, among other things. There are 3 E's in traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. Now, engineering is bold and underlined here because that's the piece that NDOT has the greatest ability to affect. So I'm an engineer. We're seeking to help McFerrin experience a better roadway environment with an engineered design, rather than only relying on educating people about speeding and driving safety. And certainly we don't want enforcement to be the only tool that helps people drive safe in your neighborhood. This connects really closely with safety and Vision Zero. So for anyone who's not aware, Vision Zero is the idea that nobody should have to be seriously injured or killed on Nashville's public roadways. Where this relates to speed is demonstrated by the infographic on the screen here. And essentially it states that if somebody's hit while they're walking by a vehicle going 25 miles an hour, they have about a 90% chance of survival. Now, as that speed climbs to 35 or even upwards of 45 miles an hour, the chance that they live from being hit starts to go way down. So in neighborhoods where we know that people want to walk, particularly where there are things like schools and parks nearby, it's really important that we make sure people are following the speed limit and driving appropriately. Ideally, just having the speed limit would be enough, but often we see streets that experience high speeds, even though they are in neighborhoods like yours. This is a really popular program. So in August of 2024, when McFerrin was selected, we were choosing from over 500 applications in the queue. So we were only able to choose 25 streets. Every 6 months or so, that's about the amount Nashville selects to do traffic calming. But what that means is out of all the streets that have applied for traffic calming, the data we collected and analysis we did on McFerrin made you all rise to the very top of that list. So that indicates to us that you do have a lot of cars driving on McFerrin, often at high speeds. So there are a few things in NDOT's traffic calming toolbox, but a lot of other things that Metro does. So we want to take these meetings as an opportunity to publicize Hub Nashville. That's a number, a website, hub.Nashville.gov, and it's an app. All three of those are ways to basically make requests of Nashville's government. So it could be about traffic calming or road safety in general, or anything down to like potholes, debris, you name it. It's got a lot of really good resources on there to help people make requests. This is the map of the traffic calming project. I believe these were the extents that were applied for, and it is McFerrin Avenue from Main Street on the southern end up to West Eastland Avenue on the northern end. We also see that we have 3 schools in the vicinity of McFerrin, and then Frederick Douglass Park is over to the west. So I believe all 3 of those things were helping you all get prioritized for this project. What we're looking at here is a screenshot of Nashville's online traffic calming tracker. So you'll notice, in addition to the yellow highlighted line that's McFerrin, there are a handful of lighter magenta lines. Those are all other applications that we have not yet selected. And then the blue dashed lines are streets where we've already been able to install traffic calming. So if anyone is unfamiliar with what a project like this looks like, you could go over to Chickamauga Avenue, check it out, as well as North 14th Street. Or if you want to cross the tracks over into McFerrin Park, Lishi, Grace, and Meridian all have traffic calming installed as well. So in the last meeting, we talked about a pretty wide range of options. We reviewed a concept design that we put together. Now I'm going to present the measures that we ultimately decided on for the final design. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about or take questions on some of those other devices. So as is pretty typical in the traffic calming program, the core of this design relies on speed cushions. These work a little bit like speed bumps like you might see in a grocery store parking lot, but they're stretched out along the length of the road to achieve a higher target speed. So a speed bump is really for like 5 to 10 miles an hour. These are designed to be driven over at around 20 to 25. All that is to say, we're not asking people to like really crawl over these. We're essentially putting down devices that are intended to encourage people to drive at or around the speed limit. They're about 3 inches high, 6 feet wide, and on this particular street, we're going with 10.5 foot long speed cushions. The width there is pretty specific. It's intended to basically be large enough to affect personal vehicles, cars, light trucks, that kind of thing, but have less an effect on larger vehicles with wider wheelbases, those being fire trucks and ambulances. They're not perfect, as certainly a fire truck may hit kind of those little side tapered area of the ramps, but they're designed to minimize the impact to those vehicles. I mentioned that we pretty often rely on speed cushions for traffic calming, and we do that because we know it's a fairly efficient investment of Metro's funds for infrastructure. When we conducted a study of before and after traffic calming projects with 6 foot by 7 foot long speed cushions, we found that the average speed on those streets came down from 31 miles an hour to 22 miles an hour. And the 85th percent speed came from 37 before installation down to 25 miles an hour after installation. If I recall correctly, McFerrin had an 85th percent speed when we measured right around that 37 mile an hour mark. So we're hoping to see some pretty significant decreases in speed if this project is installed. In addition to that, we talked a lot about bulb outs. We're proposing 3 sets of these along the length of McFerrin, and we'll be able to look at the specific locations in just a minute. But While we're here, I want to point out that these are intended to shrink the intersection that may be a little larger than it needs to be for the purpose of reducing turning speeds and shortening crossing distances. So on large intersections, we can tighten the turning radius, and that slows vehicles as they're making a turn. That's a benefit for crossing safety on its own because it gives a driver more time to see if somebody is in the crosswalk that they're turning into. But it also improves the pedestrian experience by limiting the amount of space they have to traverse while conflicting with vehicles. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. It also improves visibility of crosswalks that may be affected by drivers parking too close. So the typical code in Nashville is that you shouldn't be parking within 30 feet of a crosswalk. And that's because we want drivers to be able to see when people are waiting on the sidewalk to cross the road and have the opportunity to stop and let them cross. That was a lot of information pretty quickly, but I want to pause and just take any questions that have come up so far. Next, we're going to just sort of page through the plans, and then after that, talk about how this project moves forward in the process. But do I have any questions? Okay. Well, yeah, feel free to shoot a message in the chat or come off mute. I'll just kind of keep going and narrate our way through these plans. So the concept we're looking at here is very similar to the one we reviewed last time. We were able to find 6 places for sets of speed cushions along McFerrin Avenue. And then the bulb outs are at Maxwell Avenue, the crosswalk at the school. So that's not at a cross street, but it's there to protect the crosswalk itself. And then it's Silverdine as well. So moving from north to south, so Cleveland Street, you can see, is over here on the left. We have a set of speed cushions right before you get to Maxwell Avenue. Then the bulb outs immediately after at Maxwell. The next set of cushions is between the 2 legs of Mansfield Street. These are all between like 390 and 450 feet apart. We try to achieve like a really even spacing whenever we can. It's not always easy with driveways and things like that, but we were fairly satisfied with the spacing we were able to find. The next set of speed cushions is right before the crosswalk that heads over to the school. You can see that there. Let's see. Next is right in front of the school, so just past Marina Street. I'm placing a set of cushions at that location. Next one is right in front of 114 McFerrin Avenue. That's between Silverdine Place and the entrance to the school Circle Drive. Next, we have bulb outs at Myrtle Street, Silverdine Place, McFerrin Avenue. Those 4 crosswalks exist already, so we have them noted just in case these are the plans that get repaved by. We want to make sure that those aren't left off, but the bulb outs are there to kind of make those crossing distances a little shorter, as well as make sure nobody's parking too close to the crossings. And then we have one final set of speed cushions in the block between Silverdine Place and Gallatin Avenue / Main Street. Zooming in a little bit to Maxwell and McFerrin, this is that set of bulb outs. We're refreshing that white stop line just to make sure it's abundantly clear that that's what's going on there. We do use these as an opportunity to kind of narrow the roadway. That's an intersection safety goal in mind, but these will generally be constructed with paint, usually white paint, and those flexible delineators. Here are the bulb outs at the crosswalk. You'll notice there are not 4, but 3. The reason for that is if we put a 4th one on this side, we would be blocking the driveway to the school. So there's really no need for a bulb out there because we would not expect anyone to be parking like immediately in front of that circle drive. But what is important to know is that parking immediately adjacent to the crosswalk is what we're discouraging here. So should these be installed, we'll go ahead and move those no parking signs to that 30-foot distance from the crosswalk. Next is the bulb outs at Silverdine and McFerrin. This is a pretty standard four-way intersection. The traffic along McFerrin Avenue is not stop controlled, but along Silverdine and Myrtle Street, it is. So these here are uncontrolled crosswalks, and pedestrians are relying on either vehicles seeing them and stopping or waiting for a gap to cross. Hopefully the latter or former there instead of the latter. And then the last page of the plans is just kind of a construction detail bird's eye view of what these cushion configurations look like. You'll notice that we have 4 across, where on most streets we'll have 2 or 3. That's just because McFerrin is pretty wide as streets go, as I'm sure you all know. But the idea here is to place enough cushions that no one is able to drive around them and continue going at a high speed. We want to make sure if we're doing these, we want to cover the length or the width of the road so that they're not ignored. That is all the plans. I'm happy to go back to any portion if anyone wants to take like a closer look at any of the spots, but that was sort of the quick run through of the design we're looking at. Next in the presentation is going to be sort of the rest of the project process, how the balloting is going to work, what you all can expect to have happen in the next few weeks, just in case anyone was wondering. But do I have any questions about the design or the plans themselves?
David, I do have a question for you. What can you tell us about noise? Because there's the safety aspect and then there's the quality of life aspect. And like Bill had mentioned, the street does get noisy and all that. One of my concerns is that if we are putting these cushions in the streets, what does it sound like when a vehicle hits, or 5,000 vehicles a day hit these? Do you have any information about that?
Yeah, none that is super specific, but essentially the industry idea is that these are noise reducing in the grand scheme of things. So vehicles aren't like silent when they're going over these, especially if they were going to hit it at a high speed. That does kind of make a little like clump sound of sorts. The benefit is that there will be less of an opportunity for vehicles to be like really loud, kind of drive the engine super fast sort of noise. And on the whole, the hope is that a traffic calming project will generate a quieter neighborhood, even if at Cushion, for instance, you may hear the tires go up and down.
And some trees in your yard could also help to muffle between your house and the road, could help to muffle the sound of the traffic if that's something that you're concerned about. Trees surprisingly are helpful reducing sound.
I agree, and I would love to, but I have about 1.5 feet between my house and the sidewalk. And that's, we were talking about the concern of not having enough soil mass for roots to establish. That's the situation I'm in. There's a retaining wall and there's my foundation, and there's about 1.5 feet between them. Okay, thank you, David.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, generally that's what I've got on noise. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I imagine that these things are going to be quieter than what the speed bumps that we're familiar with that are made out of concrete and are more aggressive. Is that fair to say? As far as noise goes? Okay.
For sure.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, we can come back to this if necessary. I'll go ahead and keep moving along. So this flow chart we're looking at is sort of a roadmap of a typical traffic calming project. We covered a lot of this in the first meeting, but to briefly recap, this all starts with an application to NDOT. We take that application, collect data, do some GIS analysis, make sure it's a project that's going to work, and then enter it into a prioritization formula that considers things like proximity to schools, availability of sidewalks, crash history, speeds and volumes, most importantly. Then you all were selected to have traffic calming installed. We did our first neighborhood meeting in mid-December. There we presented a kind of rough concept of what we had in mind, but then we did a field review. So a couple of weeks ago, we went out to McFerrin, spent a few hours on site, collecting data about the grades, double checking the width of the road, sort of experiencing it for ourselves, making sure we understood, what you all were observing and experiencing as residents on McFerrin. And then after that, we completed our design and drew up those plans. So we're here tonight in the red circle, this second neighborhood meeting. It is optional. I'm glad we're here because there's plenty to talk about. But next, we're going to do the online ballot. So what that is mailing postcards to everyone on McFerrin before a 6-week voting period is opened. Should 66% of respondents vote yes, I do want this to happen, the project will be entered into the construction queue and then ultimately be built, hopefully between 8 and 10 months after that. It's not 8 and 10 months because it takes that long to build these. It's just how long it takes to get to the front of the line to be built. For better or worse, there are a lot of traffic calming projects slated to be built in Nashville, and NDOT will just get to this one as soon as they can. A little bit more about the balloting. This is what the postcard looks like on the back. It'll have the date that voting closes printed in the top right corner. And then in the bottom right, there's going to be a unique ID code. That helps us verify that all the votes we're getting are accurate and not coming from strange places. You're able to vote yes or no. There's no like maybe. You would just kind of abstain if that was your thought. And then, like I mentioned earlier, if 2/3 of respondents vote yes or more than 2/3, the project will move forward. So should we get like 50% yes, 50% no, that project would not be successful. What we've just seen would not be installed. So we're leaving it sort of in y'all's hands as the residents. This next slide is just a bit about like who is eligible to vote. So essentially to generate this mailing list, we pull the property records from Nashville's mailing list generator tool. Basically, we draw a polygon around all of these parcels that abut the affected right-of-way, McFerrin Avenue in this case. Churches, schools, residential properties will each get 1 vote. You don't need to have a McFerrin address if you're like facing a cross street like Marina. You'll be included as well. If you own multiple properties, we'll only send you the 1 ballot card. We don't intend for someone with like 10 properties to vote 10 times. And then any lots that like don't have buildings on them, we'll go ahead and remove those as well. We're kind of looking for the places where people are living to be weighing in. I don't know if you'll have any like operating businesses. Maybe the one down on Main Street would fall into this category, but they are ineligible. So it's sort of the people that live in the neighborhood that will be making this decision for the street. I think that's all I had to cover on ballot zone, which brings us to just kind of our general questions. I've also got my contact information somewhere at the end here. Yeah. Any questions from the group on the traffic calming, balloting, any of that? After this, I'm going to give like a brief sort of jump into the bikeway side of this, but want to make sure that we talk about traffic calming as much as we need.
The 66% yes vote needed, does that mean you need at least 60, you need to have at least 66% of the people highlighted there voting, or just as long as the yes votes are 66% or higher?
The second one.
Okay.
So theoretically, if 6 people out of everyone voted and 4 of them voted yes, that would be considered a successful project. It would be a pretty huge undertaking to get every one of those property owners to vote, and even 2/3 of them is quite a lift. Anyone else?
So when do you think we would expect that those ballots would arrive?
That's a good question. So the design, for all intents and purposes, is finished. So we could be publishing those online and then sending the mailers out as soon as like next week. I would expect it maybe sometime in the next 3 weeks or so.
And then the voting was a 6-week period. Is that what I heard?
That's correct. And
Okay.
the due date for them will be on the ballot. So if you like thought you might have gotten yours late or something, you'd be able to find out. And just so everyone's aware, if you think you should receive a ballot but don't, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to just kind of look up your name and get you your code that way.
Okay.
Anything else on the traffic calming? Okay, well, that sounds good. I'm going to really quickly backtrack to the beginning of the pilot bikeway implementation presentation. And just to recap, the background here is in our last meeting about this project, it was pointed out that McFerrin was both planned for a bikeway and slated to be repaved in the near future. So that situation is one that was flagged as a really good opportunity to get a project done without expending as many resources as we would need to if it was like just starting from scratch. But I want to give a little bit of history about McFerrin Avenue as it relates to this bikeway, just so everyone knows kind of where this came from and why. So all the way back in 2017, Nashville did a study called Walk and Bike, made the Walk and Bike Plan, where McFerrin Avenue was designated as a minor separated bikeway. 5 years later, there was a walk and bike update that added a lot of specific information, some update to newer industry standards, as well as a pretty in-depth work plan that gave NDOT, which had formed recently, a really good roadmap on just how they were going to implement the bikeway and sidewalk program for the next, I think it was 4 years. So we're pretty deep into that period now. It was also shown on the Choose How You Move interactive map. That's what the resident who pointed it out to us was looking at. It is worth noting that Choose How You Move did not fund this bikeway directly. So this isn't a Choose How You Move project. It goes back a little older than that, but it is part of Nashville's intended bike network that was outlined in those other 2 previous plans. And then, like I mentioned, last December, it was flagged as an opportunity to do kind of a quick build project with the planned repaving. So here are a couple of maps of those 2 things. This is from Walk and Bike as published in 2017. And we can see here McFerrin Avenue runs north to south and is kind of the main connector that gets you from Woodland Street and Main Street north up to Douglas Avenue. There are a whole lot of other bikeways around here. We're all very excited for each of them. But this blue line is what we're talking about here tonight. This is the interactive map from Choose How You Move. So this may look a little more familiar if you're familiar with the recent transit referendum. And here it's labeled as a protected bikeway. So that's what those kind of double dashed lines mean. And while we're zoomed in here, I want to just kind of note that it connects to a whole bunch of other intended and existing bike infrastructure. So up here on Douglas, we have bike lanes existing. And then Main Street down here, there's no bike infrastructure yet, but there is high frequency transit. So if you were making a trip that connected a bike ride within a bus ride and maybe another bike ride at the end, there's that opportunity as well. Just so everyone's aware and kind of maybe curious about what is a protected bikeway, the quote here is pulled from Walk and Bike 2022 and sort of serves as a loose definition of what that means in Nashville. But what we're talking about is basically bicycle lanes with a designated buffer space and physical separators. So I pulled an example of what that could look like from Google Street View. This is Buchanan Street, a project that was implemented in 2021. But this kind of infrastructure is probably familiar to most of you if you spend time driving around Nashville. Basically, the advantage is you have vehicles in the center doing their own thing, some space to keep the modes separate and safe. And then generally on the outside, we have the bike lanes where people will be riding their bikes, but physically separated in space from vehicles, not necessarily by like crash-worthy separators, but kind of a visual impediments to vehicles veering into that bike lane space. And then lastly, I kind of want to just show why this may be an important connection from a bikeability perspective. And really, it's the same reason that it is a popular road to drive on, as you all know. So this is one of the only connections north to south across Ellington that doesn't interact with interstate ramps. So when we design bike networks, we try really hard to make sure that fast-moving vehicle traffic is separate from bike traffic, and avoiding interstates and kind of that sort of strategy is one that is important. This will hopefully provide access for people beyond the Maxwell Heights neighborhood to go to places like Five Points. Once East Nashville Spokes, another bikeway project, is installed, we'll be able to get downtown in a safe environment. And really, we're just kind of hoping this will provide a link through the neighborhood and give access to the restaurants and other amenities that you all have in your vicinity. So what is next? Before this project is implemented, what we need to do is do some more data collection. We're looking for a traffic analysis to make sure we understand what impacts will be had to people driving, as well as a parking analysis, because we know that there is often a trade-off between bike infrastructure and parking on the public roadway. We're also going to develop conceptual plans, so you'll have an opportunity to look at more detail than this image. We'd like to draw up kind of a plan for what's going to be put down. And then we're going to conduct additional community engagement. So I'm really happy that you all were here and hosting us tonight to talk to your neighborhood about this project. But we also want to connect with kind of a broader audience and make sure that anyone who could be impacted by this infrastructure has the opportunity to weigh in. And then lastly, we'll need to produce design drawings that can ultimately be given to the construction crew to put this in place. So that was a lot of information. I'm sure you have questions, and I'm here to answer them as best as I can. This is a project in its really early stages, so a lot of details have not been filled in yet. But I'd love to hear any thoughts that you all have.
This is Bill speaking. Yeah, one of the things that is kind of a little unique about at least our section of McFerrin towards the south, adjacent to the school, is the parking is very different on I guess it would be the east side versus the west side of the street. On the school, there's parents dropping off kids, in the morning, and they basically park. There's 3 or 4 blocks of parking as they're doing the drop off. And then same thing in the afternoon on the pickup. So there's a really heavy demand for on-street parking at the school and a block or two, both, to the to the north and the south of the school.
Mhm.
For those of us that live on the non-school side of the street, we have little issues with driveways because we have a little grade elevation between the street and our properties. So there's a fair amount of on-street parking also on that west side of McFerrin. So there's, I think, some complicated things that need to be looked at to understand how a bike lane would or would not work, or work on one side versus the other
Mhm.
when it comes to this stretch of McFerrin.
Yeah, understood. And that's something that NDOT is always very sensitive to when we design these kinds of things. So more information to come on parking and exactly what this street section is gonna shake out to be.
Yeah. But I like the idea of a bike lane there because one, I don't drive. I wouldn't ride my bike on McFerrin at this point. Maybe again, the traffic calming kind of works hand in hand with that. The traffic calming is going to be is going to make people more inclined to use a bicycle on McFerrin, I think. Um, hopefully.
Yeah, I would like to think so as well. Certainly, it could any way that vehicles are going slower would improve the environment for both cyclists and pedestrians. Any other questions? I can go back to kind of whatever slides we need. And then, of course, this is my and the traffic calming program's email address. If you think of anything after the fact, we're more than happy to keep discussing after this meeting as well.
So, if I may, uh, it sounds like folks are pretty good with the traffic calming proposal. So there's going to be a lot more discussion if the bike lane project moves forward in the future. But for the first part of the presentation, I mean, I didn't hear a lot of concern, questions, anything. Do folks feel like that's ready to go to the balloting process?
I support it.
I'm fine with it. It's great. Look forward to it.
Cool. And I can share just we didn't get it on my street, but we did get it one street over on Lishy, and it has helped immensely on Lishy. There was some discussion of the noise. I would say it's about like the trunk of a sedan closing gently. It's not like something that you're hearing from your office and rattling the windows. It's a very kind of soft sound. It's much better than the sound of people revving their vehicles up in the middle of a neighborhood and going as fast as they can. It's been really positive over here. I think the biggest thing is we just, you know, we wish we had it on more streets in McFerrin. So we're working toward that, but you have to start somewhere. And, you know, NDOT's identified McFerrin is the place to start. In Maxwell, I know that our neighbors on Mansfield specifically are really, really, really waiting and hoping for some good news from a traffic calming award round in the near future. But like I said, you got to start somewhere, and it looks like a really good plan to me. I saw a preview of this presentation a couple days ago, and I was driving back from the UPS store today and kind of trying to envision it as I was driving, and I think it'll be a huge improvement to the street.
I agree.
Just today,
Yeah,
I was
thank you.
trying to cross in that crosswalk in front of Ross and was halfway through, and somebody blew past me. And so it's nice to see that crosswalk in particular is going to have the bulb out. I think that hopefully will help. Even just people slowing down so that they're going slow enough to stop for somebody that's in the middle of the crosswalk will be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think that the hardest thing about uncontrolled crossings like that is speed. Like, it makes such a big difference to whether or not you feel like you're able to stop in time. But 25 miles an hour to 35, like, it, you know, even well-intentioned people, if you're already at the crossing, you know, it's easy to just blow by. So we're also optimistic that the design will make it easier to cross at those uncontrolled locations.
I imagine that the improvement to that crosswalk will improve the visibility of it as well. Is that right? Because if I'm not mistaken, I think that those were just stamped and painted into the pavement there, and they're showing their age. That was about 20 years ago, and the color's fading, and the stamping doesn't look like cobblestones anymore. You can easily miss it.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. The stamping and kind of longitudinal line approach is not one that we like to take often, particularly on roads like this, because at higher speeds, you know, you need more time and to see that thing from further away. So that's why we've drawn the kind of longitudinal bars that point at vehicles, and then you can sort of see that zebra stripe from a much greater distance. So they're called high visibility crosswalk markings, and they're sort of NDOT's standard nowadays for that very reason.
That's great. 20 years ago, it wasn't an issue because McFerrin was hardly used, but that's changed dramatically over the years, in the past 5 years.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing, David, can you, when this does go to balloting and those go out, can you let us know, whether that's me or me and David, or, you know, whatever list of emails you have? Because something that's really important that I've noticed is the participation rate is sometimes not as high as we would like. So we may want to have neighbors, specifically the folks on the street, kind of very intentionally talk to neighbors that you know, and maybe some neighbors that you don't know, about making sure that they participate in the voting, and helping them understand why this is important. Because, you know, sometimes if people just zoom out and they're like, oh, a bunch of stuff going on the street, like, what's the point of that? They might say no. But if they understand that it's like, well, we have the early learning center, and we have these issues with speeding, and we have this, that, and the other, this is going to improve, you know, most people are like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. But if folks just think, oh, it's some clutter and I don't understand why they're doing that, they might vote no. So it is really important to talk to neighbors once these ballots go out, in that 6-week window, to make sure everybody knows what we're voting on, and that they hopefully vote yes, but more importantly, that they know what we're talking about, and have the opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just answer quickly. Yes, I'd be happy to let you know when the ballots go out, and if it would be useful to get the list of those properties, I can provide that as well. without the codes, of course, but on their own, that's just fine.
Well, if you give me the codes, I can just fill them all out.
If only it were so easy.
And I think that's a great idea, Sean, that if we know when the ballots go out, then we have an opportunity to make sure we talk to our neighbors, and just highlight it when the ballot goes out so it's fresh in their mind. They get it in the mail. They hear from a neighbor. I think that's a great way to kick it off. So
Great, will do. Any final thoughts, questions? Well, it sounds like I can wrap up. Is that the last agenda item for the neighborhood meeting?
The last thing was just if Sean has updates. So we can, yeah, if you have other things to do. Thank you so much, David. That was really helpful and will at least allow those of us that heard it to also share this information with other neighbors over the coming weeks. So appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, of course. And that's a good point. I forgot to mention, so this meeting is being recorded. We post all of these to YouTube as like traffic calming meetings. I will edit out the parts where the police officer is giving the updates and things like that. But this portion, at the very least, will be available for anyone to see if they weren't able to make the meeting tonight.
That's great.